Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lucore Automotive, and this is a very, very exciting episode for me because we're basically done with this thing. The 2JZ swapped Mark III Supra for Jeremy Moore and Zombie Tap Dance. It's done. Everything's finished. Well, basically, it just needs tuned. But physically, it's all done. Let's show you under the hood. You can see everything we got done. So in the previous episode, we showed you the final assembly. We discussed things like what we've done previously, the brake upgrade with the Brembo brake upgrades, the Tine, whatever, coilover conversion, the KMC wheels and Toyo tires that are on this thing. We've shown you all those bits and pieces. We've never shown you the car assembled. Well, it's all assembled and it's basically ready to run at this point in time. It has power, things work, and it'll even crank. As you can see, pop-up headlights work. A wiring harness works. Engine turns over. Everything is good. And there you have it. 2JZ GTE Aristo converted to a 2JZ GTE Domestic. Fits like a glove, a very, very tight glove. But let's discuss a couple of things that we did since you guys saw this thing all torn apart. A couple of things that you might want to know. So Toyota, when they built these cars, mounted your coolant overflow tank up here in the front, mounted up here in the corner. We cannot do that because we mounted our engine oil cooler up here in the front in that location. Far more important to have a cool location with proper airflow for your engine oil cooler versus having a overflow tanking out front. The overflow tank has now been relocated over to here with this little guy. Now this is not anything special. It's just a universal overflow tank that we picked up off of eBay. And we've got a little aluminum bracket that we built for it, to be able to hang it off the corner of where the radiator is. And then we've got a little piece of nylon line that runs directly from there over to the can. No big deal. Fitment wise, works out great. Doesn't have any bad vibration problems. Mounting it was not a big deal, no big deal. But you do want to have yourself somewhere to have this, otherwise when it does overflow, you're just going to end up spitting the coolant back on the motor. Not a good plan. While we're over here, the intake setup. This is honestly a Amazon cold air intake kit. Cool little checker flag print on the air filter itself. The elbow is just a silicone boot we have, and then just a polished piece of black aluminum. This was a little bit tricky. The intercooler piping that was in this car wouldn't fit because it was originally a 7M GTE, so we had to reinvent all of this stuff. As you can see, your intercooler drives back down here, comes back over there as far as the intake goes. All of this kit is a essentially eBay turbo kit, intercooler piping kit, universal kit. The nice thing with that is it allows you to have all kinds of different bends and sizes as far as pipes go, and the amount of money you'll spend on just buying a single pipe that's bent the way you want it can be insane. Versus you can buy one of these kits for half a nothing on eBay or Amazon or wherever. And realistically speaking, rarely is your street-driven car going to max out the capacity of even a cheaply made piping kit. They don't break. So while we're on this side of the motor, let's go ahead and talk about the turbos. This is a stock set of 2JZ GTE turbos. They were sent off to Drift Motion. They were rebuilt, had all the guts replaced, brought back to us. Now, because we are going to be running an AEM Infinity aftermarket ECU, the AEM Infinity does not have the ability to control the actuator that controls the sequential part of the turbo system. So these have been set up to be able to run in a true twin mode. So instead of having just one spool and then the other spool, they both spool at the same time and they both force feed us. Now that will induce a little bit of turbo lag. Not something we're going to really worry about. And we're very interested to see what the turbos will make, because I don't believe anybody's currently tested this setup yet. At least with a full bolt-on kit from the way it is. So let's move over a little bit further. Now, one major headache with trying to shoehorn a 2JZ GTE under the hood of a Mark III Supra is you don't have a whole lot of room. And this is a typically clutch fan driven cooling system. So you would have an engine shroud, or you would have a radiator here with a plastic shroud on it, and then you would have a clutched engine fan that would run off the front of the motor. Well, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of room here. So if we had run a clutch setup and a fan setup, there's just no room. Physically, you just can't run it. So we have a electrical fan setup that's underneath on this thing, and we've worked out this little guy here. Off the top of the upper radiator hose, we have a little adapter piece that sits in line in the radiator hose, and it has a plug on the bottom of it. Now we can run a sensor directly off of this, and it runs to a relay that controls the fan. So there's an electric fan that's mounted on this that's controlled completely independently of all of the ECU, run directly off this controller, so we don't have to worry about remembering to turn on that engine fan switch, and it gets us down into a nice small package as far as inside here. We have plenty of room to be able to run what we need to run, and should have zero problems with cooling this thing. At least we hope so. So as we get over here to the intake manifold side and the throttle body, things get a little bit more tricky. So these originally came with a stepper motor, as well as a throttle position sensor and then another sensor that are mounted over here. We don't need all of that. With the setup that we're running, we can't control it, nor do we need it. So that's all been deleted. So the stepper motor is gone, and the sensor has been plugged up. Now what we have done is we've utilized where the stepper motor and the sensor were mounted to mount some sensors. So our intake air temp sensor is now mounted here on the corner, and it is directly in line right before the throttle body, so we'll get exactly where we need to know our intake temp charge right here, pre-throttle body blades. Cool little setup. That was not easy to do, by the way. The other thing we have is we have located our map sensor directly in the side of the manifold here, which is exactly how we're going to be pulling all of our data to figure out how much fuel we need. So that sensor has been mounted directly into the side of the intake manifold. That was a little tricky to get that mounted, but it works out really well, and it actually looks basically like it was OEM meant to be there. The vacuum for the vacuum booster is run directly off of this tap off the top. This is a swivel joint that goes on top of the intake manifold and runs over to our vacuum booster. So we still have brakes to stop this thing. Now, as far as the power steering goes, this is something that we have had a lot of conversations with people about. Because the Aristo motor comes with a power steering and water pump that are both located over here, we swapped over to a 2JZ GTE US market water pump and power steering unit. Well, the problem is the power steering is over here, and none of your stuff works, okay? None of your hoses that you pre-buy are gonna work for this. There's nothing that exists for it. So we bought and modified a set of IS300 power steering hoses to be able to run from where our power steering pump is to our rack and over to this reservoir that we have mounted over here. Similar situation to the coolant overflow reservoir. This is our power steering reservoir, and it was just kind of a Amazon find. It's not specifically designed for this thing, but it's something we needed to be able to put over here. It's because our power steering is directly down here, and we didn't want to run it all crazy across the engine bay here. Now, this is typically speaking where you're going to have your cruise control or some other things that are mounted over here. We're not going to be using cruise control on this car. Sorry, Jeremy, we're deleting that for you. But this location works out really well for our power steering. And unfortunately, this is all custom made stuff, so this may be a little bit tricky if you're going to be taking on a 2JZ GTE swap yourself in your Mark III Supra. But if you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave us a comment or reach out to us on Instagram. We'll do what we can to help you out. Now, as we talked about before, this is running a drift motion fuel rail with 750cc injectors. We have the center feed, and then both of the ends of the fuel rail are deadheaded because there's physically no room to return fuel off of this guy back through. It doesn't work. There's no room for it for our setup. Now, we do have our Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator mounted over here off of the strut tower, and it does have the return directly off of the regulator itself. Nice little setup. Automotive products are excellent. We've never had any problems with anything with them. It is a boost referencing fuel pressure regulator, so as boost increases, it will also increase fuel pressure. The last thing you want to do is you want to lean the motor out while you're in boost. Then things go boom and that's the end of your motor. So very nice little piece. We use it on the boosted Lexi as well. We actually have this exact same unit that's going to be going on our Good Bad Decisions Turbo LS truck as well. It's never failed us. It's never had a problem with it. And it seems to work perfectly fine for every setup we've used, so we're going to stick with our Automotive fuel pressure regulator. More or less, the rest of the stuff that's underneath this thing is basically stock Mark III Supra stuff. We did have to modify a new throttle cable to be able to get all that stuff working correctly and all of our lengths correct. That's not a real big deal. Got a little tricky on it, but nothing real serious. If you've made throttle cables before, you know how to do that. Everything else, as far as Mark III Supra, clutch, brakes, all that fun stuff, basically all the hydraulics have been replaced. Better replace them now than replace them later. That way you don't have the whole car together and then realize you have some small problem that needs to be fixed. So we've gone ahead and replaced all the hydraulics for the brakes as well as for the clutch setup, and that's perfectly fine. We're actually going to bleed the clutch one more time and bleed the brakes one more time so we can make sure everything is nice and tight. And then we're going to have our wonderful friend Eric from CII Performance come over and throw a tune file at this AEM Infinity ECU, which is exciting because then this thing will start up and we can drive it. And then Jeremy can drive it after we're done with it. Sorry, Jeremy. That's what happens when somebody else built your car. I gotta drive it first. Over here on the corner, we mounted our fuel pump setup. So there's a fuel pump relay. That is a key-on fuel pump relay. That way we don't have any problems with fuel pump. There's also a hot wire that's run directly to the fuel pump off of this. One of the problems that 80s and 90s turbo cars were notorious for is as they got up in the rev range, they didn't hold a good 12-volt signal to the fuel pump. And as you weaken the fuel pump, you provide less oomph with the fuel and you end up not getting enough on the top end. So this setup allowed us to run a constant 12 volt directly to the fuel pump, so we shouldn't have any kind of problems with the fuel pump dropping out. So there you go. The 2JZ swapped Mark III Supra. It's basically finished. Now we do have a couple of small little things that we need to button up as far as fit and finish goes and to make sure that everything is perfect before we ship this off and let Jeremy have it. But before we do that, we are going to make sure this car runs properly and everything is happy and healthy. We're going to put some miles on it, we're going to get it up and down the road, make sure the brakes work, make sure the hydraulics work, make sure the suspension is set up correctly, make sure all of the things that we've had our hands on, which is essentially everything in this car, make sure all of it works before we hand it back to our customer. So the next video will be this thing firing up with Eric from CII Performance here helping us out and getting this thing to fire, and then we're going to take it on a road trip. Well, maybe not a road trip, but a test drive. And provided everything goes well on the test drive, which it will, we can start breaking in everything that we need to break in, and then maybe take it to the dyno for some tuning. But that'll be in the next episode. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Hopefully you followed along through this 2JZ GTE process on this Mark III Supra build. It's been a process for sure. As always, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out to us. Leave a message in the comments. Reach out to us on Instagram. You can follow us at LucoreRacing on Instagram. You can reach out to us there anytime you'd like to. We're always here to help. You know, this is a tough process. Kudos to those of you who have done this yourselves in your own garages and actually gotten it to work. Hopefully it looks as nice as ours does, and you're out enjoying it. And we look forward to this car being out on the road here very shortly as well. So please do click on the subscribe button. As I said, drop us a comment if you like it. If you have any questions about it, whatever, drop it in the comments below. As always, please click on that like button as well. It helps YouTube to understand that you actually like what it is we do and that you actually watch this stuff. So we will be back with you guys shortly with this car starting up, getting tuned, and then going for its very first maiden voyage. Hope you guys come along for that. We're pretty excited about it. Finally. We'll see you next time. Take it easy.